I made this movie because I was bullied as a kid. And it was a pretty serious thing that I went through. It started in elementary school and carried on until about sophomore year in high school. And it involved lots of getting beaten up, lots of punches. I couldn't get, basically in elementary school, I couldn't get from school to my house without a group of kids punching me basically every single day. And I did not know how to make it stop, and nobody around me really seemed to understand, or from my perspective at the time, seemed to care very much. I was told, it's your fault, figure it out, this is just what kids do, this is a rite of passage, this will make you stronger. And eventually, I stopped complaining about it. I stopped trying to get help because I really gave up on the notion that I could receive that. And I carried that experience with me into my life, into my career as a filmmaker. And when I started to think about making a film about bullying, what I was really thinking was, how powerful could it be if I could make a film that helps give a frame to what the experience of bullying is? Because even though it was 20 some odd years later, you still heard the same things being said in society. You still heard people saying, this is a rite of passage. This is an inevitability. This is something that we can't fix. You still heard from parents being told that they couldn't speak to schools about it, that schools would shuffle them out and give them lip service. And then on top of that, we every so often would hear about a tragedy, that someone had died by suicide because they'd been bullied. And it felt to me that this fundamental thing that was missing was a concept of agreement. I said, if we could get people to simply agree that this is unacceptable, that this is not something that we ought to have to endure, that our kids have to endure, that could be the starting point for real and substantive change. And you know, in the US, over 140,000 students a day do not go to school because they're afraid to go to school because of bullying. They stay home because they are terrified of what might happen. And that feeling, that's something that I can relate to. If you think about bullying, it really affects the whole community. It affects students that are at the top of the social ladder. It affects students that are at the bottom of the social ladder, adults, parents. There's such a loss in academics, in promise, in all the amazing things that can happen when a school is working well together. So that when you see schools that actually work towards improving the climate in school, they report that everything gets better. They perform better in sports. Their testing goes up. But it's almost like counterintuitive to some folks that have been in the education space for a long time. It requires something of a rethink. And I think addressing bullying does require a bit of a rethink across the board. If you're looking in the room, and you're really looking for those that are being left out, it's not that hard to see who they are. But there's three really clear things that I think most experts agree define bullying. The first is that there's an intent to harm, that there's intent. There's intent to be cruel. The second is that it's repeated. It happens over and over again. And the third is that there's an imbalance of power. That's really classic bullying. And the hard part is there's no like absolute guaranteed, this is what you must, there's no like perfect manual for this. The best advice that I can give you is to, as I said, is to be with your kids in this conversation. Do not put the onus on them to resolve the problem. What I say is to students, you have the power. Your numbers to stand together as bystanders, to intervene, to not be bystanders, to step up, to defend students that are being bullied are so incredible. You have so much power. You can decide that this is not going to go on in your school. And when you make that choice, it will be hard, but I promise you you can turn things around. When someone intervenes in a situation of bullying, it stops in under 10 seconds. It really does stop if you speak up, but sometimes speaking up or just putting yourself in the middle may be really scary. It may not be the right choice at the right time. So what I want to just challenge you with the idea that as creative as kids are at bullying, you can be just as creative, if not way more creative, at coming up with those solutions, those ways of standing up for each other. You know, it can mean passing a note to someone that you know is having a hard time, saying, I will stand with you. I will bear witness with you. It can mean inviting them to sit at your lunch table. It can mean speaking to the bullies later, or getting a group together to speak to the bullies. It can mean going to a counselor, going to an educator. There's so many ways that you can step in.